Yes, yeah. There's a wider debate which I'm happy to return to your committee at some point about how we plan, if you like, for the planning system, because we don't particularly effectively, I don't think, in terms of ensuring enough planners are being trained and are being brought on scheme. We've lost significant amounts of planners to the private sector. We relied for many, many years on Australian, New Zealand planners. I don't think they're coming over in the numbers that we have. So there is a real capacity and capability challenge in local planning departments, bound up with historic cuts to core funding on part of local authorities, because planning departments shed officers in some cases as a result of that. But it's a real challenge in terms of having what the system needs to be doing some of this local plan work, greenbelt reviews and the rest of it. That's why we're injecting that funding.
So can I ask about the skills? I mean, they're not necessarily architects, they're not architecturally trained.
Not in-house local authority architects, no. We're talking planning, trained and qualified planning officers.
Yeah. Okay. So the system is thoroughly depleted, it has to be.
It's thoroughly depleted, yeah. I think, Your Lordship, if I say this slightly, I'm sort of straying outside my brief, but when you sort of confront the challenges of the housing and planning system that we've inherited, you pretty much bump up against the fact that the state has been hollowed out in several areas that directly impact upon the functioning of that system.
And if you train the new planners in the old way, won't we get more of the same? Is there some element of the training that will be adjusted to have these planners be more relevant to the world we're in now, as opposed to the world that we used to train planners for?
We're also, I should say, we might stray into it, but we have published a working paper, as you know, about how we can modernise planning committees. And some of that is about the ensuring, not removing that local democratic oversight of applications, particularly the most controversial or significant applications, but ensuring that trained planning officers are trained to, and have their focus on those decisions which really don't need to necessarily come back to planning committees. And Your Lordships, I've sat on a planning committee, and I can tell you that on a, for example, very technical reserved matters application, councillors are rarely engaging with the detail on that level. In many instances, they are returning to relitigating the outline decision. Now, do we need them to be doing that, or can we get more timely decisions and a more streamlined process for ensuring on those types of applications?
Well,
for example,
to help Lord Bailey with his question, do we need to have so many detailed reserved matters coming back at all?
Or can those decisions
of that wrong?
Or can those decisions be taken by trained planning officers deploying the expertise they have?
And if we're going to ask the political end of this equation, councillors in planning committees, etc., to modify their behaviour, it would be helpful to them and to the entire situation if planners had arrived with a fresh view of how the world is, how it's going to be, not how it was. And is that going to be reflected literally in the syllabus, in the things that they are taught?
I think we've got the point.
I think you're straying.
Let's wrap up on.
Yeah, I think very, very directly, I don't accept the premise of the question that we have a fundamental problem in planning departments with culture. I think a large part of the problem in many local authorities, and I know my own, is about adequate resourcing.
I just wanted to ask you about the fact that there are very many existing permissions where no building has been going on, and I wondered whether you'd considered either incentives or any form of sort of levy or some sort of sanction on situations where you've got permission and land is being land banked and no building going on, and has not been going on for very many years. It's another feature that you're looking at all.
I'll bring Will in on this because I think he'll have some useful insights. But I'd say the following couple of points in response to that. One is, I think we've got to be nuanced in how we talk about how land is used by developers. And the CMA in their recent house building study were fairly clear on the issue of land banking. I think land banking, as it's understood by the public, if you put that term to them, is not what we see happening. We certainly see land trading, and we see extensive land trading on the part of, in particular, the large volume private developers who are able to effectively navigate the very complex and uncertain system we have. And that's why they survive housing downturns, and SMEs, which we come back to, are driven out with every downturn, and we get a more and more homogenised housing market for that reason. So I think we've got to just be very careful about what we're talking about in terms of land trading. But it is definitely the case that there are sites across the country that are either being sat on or not built out at the pace we would like. There are a variety of reasons for that. In some cases, it's very straight and understandable viability issues. We may come to it, but if you look at the increase in build costs across the country, that is placing, as one factor of many, but is placing considerable strain on sites in terms of their viability. So there can be reasons that sites legitimately aren't coming forward. Where sites are deliverable and are viable, we expect them to come forward. We announced last week, as part of the changes to the framework, several measures we're taking in that regards, bringing into force some of the provisions that previous government enacted through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill in terms of commencement notices. And we are keeping this issue under review because the developers have been very clear in response to our challenge. We want to build 1.5 million new homes over the Parliament. We are making very bold reforms to the planning system and other changes. They have said in response to that they are willing to match that ambition. They want to step up on delivery. We expect them to do so. We hope they will do so. In a scenario where that doesn't happen, I think we will have to return to build out more generally, in addition to the measures we've already announced, because we do need sites that are viable and deliverable, and I use those words very carefully, to be built out at pace by developers. Where there are constraints in place that they're legitimately facing, we want to be able to provide support. That's, for example, why we established the New Homes Accelerator to look on large sites across the country which are consented or near consented. Are there particular challenges that central government might help unblock, whether that be statutory consultees, planning capacity and support, particular challenges in local planning departments where additional support from the centre might help bring development forward.
Purely on logistics, which is to say on the measures that the Minister's just mentioned that we confirmed we would take forward last week when we published the MPPF, in particular around commencement notices, but also the ability where build-out isn't occurring for the local authority to therefore in the future refuse to determine applications from the developer concerned. Those were provisions contained in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act that we will publish technical consultations on in the new year and seek to have the consultations responded to and the relevant regulations laid, assuming we decide to take forward those measures within the course of 2025.